Hi, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be continuing the massive Ren Faire costume project that I've been working on lately. I just got my pattern in the mail. I wanted to start this a couple days ago, but it turns out that the size I had was too small. Today I'm going to be making a really oh hello! So today I'm going to be making a heavily modified variation of Butterick B4669. So it's the sort of stays adjacent pattern that everybody uses for a Ren Faire bodice. I'm gonna be combining two of the views, and then I'm going to be lengthening the kind of peplum sort of thing into more of a skirt. Just like in my sketch that I've done of this drawing, which I will put right here. So I'm going to be starting with view C, and then I'm going to be taking the skirt sort of thing from view B and modifying it so it works with this point in the front. I'm probably going to be going down one size from my recommended size because I want a nice lacing gap. I also am going to try to make this chemise that she's got with the fun floofy sleeves if I have time. So I'm going to take my Baja Blast and start tracing my pattern. Wish me luck. Okay, so I've got my pattern all traced out. I've already done a mock-up. This is all you get to see because it's not appropriate to... because it's basically see-through, so it's very indecent. I have to make a couple of changes to it. I'm gonna shorten it by a ½ inch all the way around because it's just a little long in the waist for me. I'm not actually high-waisted, but this pattern for some reason just goes down a little further. I'm also going to raise the neckline ½ an inch because it dipped down a little bit too far for my taste. I also am going to add ½ inch to each side of the center front. It's just a little bit too small for me. With those three small changes, everything else worked really well, everything else fit really nicely. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust my pattern as needed, and then I'm going to just do a quick measure and make sure that the skirt pieces are still going to fit this correctly. And then next time you see me, I'm going to be ironing some fabric. Okay, so after I had traced out my pattern pieces, I cut them out of both my linen, which is actually leftover from my skirt project I did a couple of years ago now. It's a green, I would say midweight linen, and I only had about a yard, maybe a yard and a half left. I also cut out an interlining of cotton duck, which is the black fabric. Okay, so I've cut out I've got my lining, and then from the same fabric I am cutting out basically the same piece but with like some extra around it so that I can hoop it without any issues. Since all of this section is going to be getting this embroidery pattern on it, I just have to print this out on to a sheet of my sticky embroidery stuff that I used in my video of making my husband's Elven vest. And then I'll base the this outer linen layer onto this duck canvas for stability, and then attach the embroidery pattern and start embroidering the linen. So I drew out my pattern for the embroidery onto just printer paper, and then I copied that onto a adhesive water-soluble embroidery stabilizer. I used this in the project for my husband's vest as well. It washes up really well and it holds up really nicely to the embroidery. For the vines of the ivy, and yeah, it's ivy, kind of stylized. For the vines of the ivy, I used DMC's Diamant Grande, which is the same thread that I used on my husband's vest, but I only used the light silver in this size. For the stems of the ivy, I used, shockingly, a stem stitch with this nice light silver, thicker thread. And then I switched to a different thread, which is DMC's regular diamant in the color Old Rose, which is a rose gold. And for the outlines of the leaves, I used a back split stitch. If you want to figure out how to do that, I would definitely recommend looking it up. I am not probably... There's a high chance that I'm not doing it right. But I think it turned out really good. It is... I think that stitch was definitely the right one to go with. It is nice and flat against the fabric, and it's also a long enough stitch and flat enough that it reflects the light really nicely, which is important when you're using a metallic thread like this. For the veins of the leaves, I switched to the same thickness of thread and same type, but in the light silver color. So it's the same as the stems, just the smaller version. And here you can really see the difference in color between it and the rose gold. My lamplight is pretty warm, so it might be a little hard to tell at times. And I am using this to go along the veins of the leaves. And I'm once again using a back split stitch. And here is that panel I was working on all done. I went ahead and trimmed away as much of the excess stabilizer as I could, because when you are trying to dissolve it, the less that there is, the easier it is to get rid of it all. And then I also trimmed away the excess fabric that I was using to keep my piece hooped properly. Then I went ahead and cut out the remaining pieces of my project, first in the linen, and I used a rotary cutter for that because it was, you know, pretty shifty. And then I took the next embroidery pattern and copied it onto my stabilizer. Cut that out and then applied it to the fabric. Once again, working with the thicker silver thread to create the stems. And then the thinner rose gold thread for the leaf outlines. And the thinner silver thread for the leaf veins. And here are all of the finished embroidery panels. There are 6 in total, a center front, a side panel, and then the 2 skirt panels are also embroidered. Once I was done with all of the embroidery, I realized I still needed to cut out a few pieces, like my back panel, both out of the linen and the cotton duck, as well as my lining panels. I hadn't done all of them yet, so I cut out those lining panels in the cotton duck as well. I wanted it to be nice and sturdy. I know you're supposed to use couture for this, but I just wanted to use what I had on hand. This is pretty much all stash except for the thread. So next up, I needed to attach my side panels and my front panels together. But first I needed to fill my bobbin. So once I finished sewing my front panel and my side panel together, I realized that I needed to top stitch it. So I did that. I top stitched the entire thing so that that seam was going towards the side for a little bit more stability. And then I flatlined my back panel like I did with all of the other panels. And I was really careful around the curves and on any parts that went through the bias to make sure that I didn't stretch it at all. And here is that flat-lined piece. So next up I needed to attach all of my outer layer pieces together for the top. Those two front panels, and then I just sewed those to the back. And then I also pressed those side seams towards the side panels and top stitched those down as well. Okay, so I have everything together for the bodice for now. Now I need to attach my skirt fronts to my skirt back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the front panels to the back panel at the sides and then press it. So there's the back panel, and I'm going to have to be really careful not to like let this move too much so that it doesn't stretch, because a lot of it's on the bias. Like the side panels are on the bias on the sides of the skirt, and then technically the front panels were on the bias on the bit that I embroidered, but I did interface it and it's been embroidered, so I don't think it's gonna stretch, because I think all of this stitching and the interfacing are gonna keep it pretty together. So I'm gonna do that, and I'm gonna stitch these together. Okay, so I've got the bodice basically put together. I'm going to go ahead and fill in these little sections where the embroidery threads need to connect. That shouldn't take me too long. And then when I'm done, I'm going to pin and sew my skirt onto the bodice only on the outer layer, because I also have to do that same embroidery connection between the bodice and the skirt section. So I'm gonna work on getting the embroidery all fixed up. I'm probably not gonna film that part because it's really just like filling in little bits. So I think next time you see this, it's going to be me attaching the skirt to the bodice. Off camera I did that, and then I sewed together all of my lining pieces. I did this in the same way as I did the entire bodice outer layer, just, you know, minus all the flat lining. Once I had my lining all put together, it was time to attach it to my bodice outer. I did this at the center fronts, and then I flipped it down so that the skirt was sandwiched between the bodice lining and the bodice outer layers. And then it was time to finish up that seam between the top and the bottom. So I sewed it up and then flipped it right side out. So next up, I sewed my boning channels. I did one on the outer edge, left a space for my grommets, and then I sewed another boning channel a little further in so that my grommets will be sandwiched between two boning channels, which is the best way to keep things from kind of pulling. And then I cut my boning itself, making sure to round my edges both by cutting them and then by filing them down. So each side gets two pieces. I'd really like to replace this with steel at some point. I just didn't have any on hand. And it was time to install my eyelets. Eyelet presses are wonderful and amazing and so helpful, especially if you have any kind of repetitive stress injury in your hands. Highly recommend. And then I went ahead and applied the binding to the top edge of the bodice as well as to the skirt. Then I cut some ribbons and melted the ends. So I have the bodice done. It's raining today, so it's a little dark, but I realized that it is the 5th of August and Ren Faire is the 12th, so I'm going to really quickly try to knock out the chemise part of this before I film my reveal footage of the bodice. Just as a reminder, I'm doing this pattern. I'm just gonna not do the gathering at the very end because I want a flowier sleeve, but the pattern for this looks really simple, so I'm gonna just whip that together really quick. I'm not gonna actually go through like how I did it necessarily because there's instructions in the packet. So if you have this pattern, you don't need me to tell you how it works. So I'm gonna just whip that together out of the cotton voile that I've got. Let's see if I can knock this out in like 3 hours. Unfortunately, I could not, in fact, knock it out in 3 hours, but it didn't actually take that much longer. I did most of the construction that day and then just finished a few things up the following morning. So I ironed my fabric, cut it out, and then started constructing the sleeves. And oh my gosh, the sleeves were so big. So I put together the elastic casing channel things, which was pretty easy. I can't say that I recommend making bias tape out of fabric this fine because it doesn't have a lot of structure to it. I tacked my elastics in on the edge, and I finished all of the seams on this chemise blouse thing with French seams, just because I had a feeling that it was probably going to fall apart if I didn't do that. So I've already washed it and it held up really well. So yeah, just did French seams on the sleeves as well as the bodice sides. I didn't allow any extra fabric for those seams either. I literally just did a 1/4 inch seam and then flipped it and did a 3/8 seam, so that it used up all of the normal 5/8 so that it used up all of the normal 5/8 seam allowance. That way I didn't have to cut anything or anything like that. Then I went ahead and attached the casing for the elastic at the top and inserted that. And the last thing before the reveal was to hem the blouse. It's really warm out. So I'm really happy with how it's turned out. I think that it did everything I wanted it to, and I would say more, but the amount of times that I stabbed myself, I feel like the amount of effort put in definitely was equivalent to what came out. That I think I bled on it somewhere when I was doing an embroidery, so you know, fun things. So there's only like 6 days left until Ren Faire, so I have to go do some cloaks, so I'm gonna go do that. And I will see you next time, which should be the full reveal of everything that I've done for this. I actually ended up having to cut a couple of pieces because I just didn't have time. Also, can I just say how amazing these sleeves are? I need these sleeves on literally everything I own now. I'm not super into this part, but the sleeves. I will not be doing either of our pants or my husband's shirt before Ren Faire, but I'm gonna try and get it done afterwards so that I have it ready for next year. If you enjoyed this video, go ahead and give it a like, and if you want to see more fantasy, Ren Faire, and upcoming spooky nonsense, then feel free to subscribe, and I will see you next time.